Greetings. We appreciate your interest in this next panel session. This is our IMARC Future Workforce panel discussion here today, this afternoon in Melbourne, covering priorities for the future resources workforce. This is a live panel discussion, so encourage anyone that has any questions on the way through to send those questions through. We really appreciate your support and attendance at this panel discussion today, and I'm sure we won't disappoint. We have an all-star panel that we have drawn together. I am moderating the session. My name is Stephen Durkin. I'm the CEO of the AusIMM, the Australasian Institute of Mining and Metallurgy, one of the founding partners of IMARC. We have a big audience today, as I said, a big global audience, in fact, so I really appreciate everyone's interest in this topic. The topic is all about how we build a sustainable talent pipeline. I think everyone that works in the industry would agree this is a critical challenge and opportunity for the resources sector, the professionals working within it, and the continuing contribution that we make to our communities. Decreasing university enrolments across traditional mining disciplines, and economy-wide demand, and in fact the global demand for graduates with future-ready skills, and a lack of understanding about opportunities in mining all make the task of developing our future professionals yet more challenging. AusIMM, through this panel session today, is bringing together experts from industry, universities and government to discuss emerging skill and capability demands, the education and training pathways necessary to meet this demand, and the ever critical imperative to attract the next generation of professionals into the resources sector. And with that as an introduction, I have great pleasure in introducing our three panelists today. Firstly, we have Professor David Cohen. Professor Cohen, or David as we're going to refer to him in the panel discussion, is the chair of the University of New South Wales, one of Australia's leading universities, the chair of the University UNSW Academic Board, and the president of the Australian Geoscience Council. So very much representing that education and university perspective in the conversation today. Greetings, David. We also have joining us the great honour of introducing Brendan Howard. Brendan is the General Manager Technical Capability at Rio Tinto. Very strong background and focus in global change management and technical capability. And really, Brendan's passion is how you drive a capable and engaged workforce. So great pleasure this afternoon to welcome Brendan. And thirdly, we have Peta Slocombe joining us from Perth, WA. Peter is the Executive Manager Capability and Culture at Northern Star Resources, a psychologist by way of background, strong interest and passion in terms of individual and organisational high performance, and in particular through Peter's role at Northern Star Resources, one of the premier gold mining companies in the world, an absolute interest in retention, engagement, development of top people within that organisation and in the industry in general. So thank you very much for joining us today, whether you're in the audience, and in particular, I thank you for our panellists today. We are really going to cover this conversation in three parts. Firstly, looking at the emerging skills gap and the capability demands, particularly from an industry point of view. We're then going to talk about education and training pathways, and then talk about how we can, as an industry, be more effective in attracting talent into our industry. So I'm going to kick off with a question to Brendan, which is all around kind of the key skill gaps that you are seeing emerge in the resources sector. And my question is really, what from your perspective are the consequences for the industry if we don't access the skills and capabilities we need? And do you actually see this as being a fundamental threat to our industry, or maybe more an opportunity or a problem that the industry's always had? So just interested in hearing initially, Brendan, your perspective in terms of the key gaps that you're seeing in the industry and how big a problem this is from your point of view.
Thanks, Stephen, and hi, everyone. Look, I believe this is a very, very significant issue facing the industry. When we take a step back and we boil it all down, ultimately all we really have as an industry is valuable resources in the ground and clever and capable people above the ground that are able to extract value from those resources. And we absolutely need to be replenishing both. If we were to tell our investors that these resources that we're depleting every day, we're not going to bother investing in replenishing them, I think that they would lose confidence in us as an industry pretty quickly. And it's no different when it comes to our human resources. We absolutely need to continue to invest in that pipeline of human resources that's going to be the driver of value for this industry for generations to come. But look, there are some really, really significant issues. And you make the point that has this issue always been there? Well, I think it's become more acute in the past 5 years or so. You alluded to in your introduction the fact that there has been really significant decline in enrolments. We are now at, for many of the core technical disciplines that underpin the resources sector, well below sustaining levels. If we take mining engineering, for example, I haven't seen the exact figures for this year, but I've heard that it's Australia-wide somewhere in the order of only 50 first-year students nationwide, with a demand just based on people retiring and natural sort of turnover and attrition, more in the order of 150 to 200 per year. So there's a clear gap, emerging gap, that has become more acute in the past 5 years and doesn't seem to be getting any better. We know that the universities are under tremendous pressure. We know that that's forced them to look at their ability to continue to deliver mining education, and that's forced some institutions to either change their curriculum or cut back, or in some very unfortunate cases even shut down. But then when we look at the skills that are being produced in those that are graduating, we recognise that in a fast-paced technological landscape for the resources sector, in many cases, many of the employers feel that the graduates aren't emerging with future-focused skills. They're emerging with skills for a mining industry, a resources sector of 2000 rather than 2020 and 2030. And so, when you put all those things together, it's a really significant threat that the industry is facing. And it's my view that, it's going to require really well-coordinated action. And at the moment, I don't think that we as an industry are galvanised well enough to take the necessary actions to address these issues that I've outlined, Stephen.
Thanks, Brendan. I think you've framed that perfectly. I mean, what you're really describing there is, to use a bit of a cliche, the perfect storm, aren't you, really? You're describing here some clear and emerging gaps, and those gaps increasing. You're describing universities under pressure. We'll address some of those questions and issues to David in a moment, but you're also seeing some very different skills that are going to be required into the future. So it really starts to feel like a perfect storm in an unhealthy way. Peter, is that how you see it? I mean, do you see this as being, as profound a threat as Brendan's painting the picture of? I mean, that's how we see it at the AusIMM. I'd be interested in your perspective from HR point of view, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, look, I think, one of the things that we've learned about 2020, if nothing else, is that perfect storms are perfect opportunities, and sometimes it needs to reach a tipping point before we collaborate and do things differently. I think one element is the presence or absence of enough talent coming through the pipeline, and certainly coming out of universities technically, and no one would deny that that's absolutely an issue. I think a company our size, which is not massive, we're heading to about 3,000 people. We have about 200 vacancies at any given kind of point in time, certainly currently. I think the bigger issue and the more important issue is the third issue or solution, which is how we work and readiness of people to participate and get engaged in the mining sector that might not come through traditional pathways. I think obviously there's technical expertise, there's compliance, and there's a real sort of scientific rigor that comes with our graduates, but there are also lots of other elements of talent that we increasingly need that don't necessarily increasingly appear in curriculum or in our workforce. The ability to collaborate, communicate, draw out information from people, the ability to think ahead, not just think transactionally, but to think in a transformational way, the ability for people to be agile and deal with change a lot better. I think, they're skills that we can definitely use, and this is a time to not keep doing what we've always done, I think, in terms of who we see as future talent in our businesses.
So from what you're saying then, Peta, so you're painting a picture there that this is this is kind of like almost a cultural issue, in terms of the number of young people coming through the traditional education systems that have an interest in science and formally studying those areas. I mean, there must be other industries that have similar challenges, do you think?
Look, I think there is, and again, I see it as a really important opportunity, notwithstanding the immediacy of people and attracting them to the sector and attracting them to, so I guess firstly it's attracting, the adage of kids in science, and then there's the universities and the graduates, and then there's kind of keeping up with the demand. But I think, mining as a tradition, and I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, but I think as a tradition, mining has not shifted as fast as many cultures. If you look at, for example, underground mining techniques 100 years ago versus 70 years ago versus 30 years ago, you would still definitely, if you came down from another planet, you would still definitely identify exactly what is occurring. And that will always be true to a certain extent of the resources sector. But I think the agility of how we carry out our roles and what skills we need, particularly as technology changes, the subject matter expertise will be automated in many respects. And so we've got to look at how can we do change, do teams, do collaborations within businesses, within technical disciplines, and between organisations and sectors. And that's exciting, and it's probably really quite underutilised.
Yeah. And you, I think that's a really good point, Peta. And do you, just to be really pointed in terms of kind of just to help us sort of think of the issue here, that the 200 graduates that you're looking to, 200 graduates, is that what you said before? That
200 employees. So we have 200 sort of vacancies presently. I think we'll have about 110 graduates next year. But yeah, just in terms of the workforce in its first, first 5 years,
What are the three key qualities or attributes that you'd be looking for in terms of those employees, just to kind of frame the conversation?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think if you look at the research coming out through personality traits and future leaders, I think they're pretty clear. So the first one is agility. We don't just learn information and then maybe we map different geological kind of, areas, but we still keep applying the same sort of skills to different areas. I think what we need to do is we need people who are incredibly agile and have a mix of obviously a competence, but also a humility about continuing to learn and adapt and change and have fresh eyes on things. We need an ability for people to work together to maximise the value chain and to get more. So I think that the agility and the learning kind of piece is important. The collaboration, cooperation between people is important. And I think the ability to think ahead of 3 steps ahead of where we're at to start to solve and approach problems. And so for us, that means moving people around more as well and, applying things to areas that they might not have been on.
So it would be fair to say it's more the attributes and behaviours and the characteristics of a person rather than kind of necessarily technically what they've learned. So maybe a question to David would be, to what extent do you think that the current education programs are delivering what industry needs based on what you've heard today, David?
So look, I think Brendan and Peter have framed the issues beautifully. There are the two aspects to sustainability and agility. The first one is up our end, the supply of graduates to go out to the geoscience professions. And the second one is the development opportunities once they're already in the game and that's from graduation to cremation. So that their whole career. From the university perspective, we're thinking through in all our programs, not just science, engineering, business. What's the balance between the skills and knowledge specific to a discipline, such as geology, versus the more generic skills and knowledge that will best fit them for an entire professional life? So it's this question of depth versus breadth, and that has a tremendous impact on the way we design our degrees and the resources that we need, especially in terms of staff to deliver those programs. One group I've looked at is the Australian swimming team. So a long time ago, the coaches realised if you're going to be really successful, you need diversity in training. Spend a bit of time in the gym and not just doing endless laps of the same pool. So questions such as, do we need to be giving our graduates 3 detailed courses in petrology, or maybe just 2 in petrology and 1 in Python coding? What in the future will best fit them to be able to adapt to any new situation? So it is at those 2 levels. What we need to do and to get the graduates which are ready for a diversity of geoscience careers, not just the resources sector. And then from that point onwards, what's the nature of the collaboration to provide that long-term professional development systems that keep people in the industry or attract them from other industries into us?
So thanks for that, David. I think be interested kind of just in your reaction to this question. We've framed this as being quite a profound problem. It's quite a systemic issue. Be interested in your view. To what extent you think kind of the problem lays at the feet of industry itself versus the universities maybe haven't kind of responded in the way that we might have needed. Versus maybe the role of government to kind of stimulate some activity there. I'm not looking to play the blame game, but I'd just be interested in your perspective and kind of, I don't know, Brendan's challenged us, that we require a well-coordinated approach, and that's kind of the main message coming through from today. But just so we can kind of diagnose the problem from an academic point of view, kind of where do you sort of see some of the failings of this?
Don't blame the universities.
I'm allowed to.
You can.
Yeah. So I think part of the issue is as a collective, and this is where the Geoscience Council has a responsibility. What are the expectations? What are the future goals of industry? What are the expectations, the future goals of the university? And there is a bit of misalignment between those two. Yeah. And as far as government goes, we're a country that has almost no central planning for future workforce requirements. There is a bit going on, but it really has not crystallized well in the connection between university sector, our guys going into government, going into the private industry, going into areas outside of the geoscience areas. So I think it's been a lack of sufficient connectivity between the 3, and I guess for all the sectors, what do we count as success?
Yeah. I think that's well.
And I think, if I could jump in there, Stephen, I think I feel a lot of sympathy for the universities trying to read the signals from industry, right? Because there are, if there's 100 different companies, there'll be 150 different opinions, right? On what they expect to see from their graduates. But if you sort of simplify it a little bit, you can sort of see, if I speak on behalf of the likes of Rio and I look at the amount of, data analytics and automation and robotics that are packed into our operations today, and but not all mines are operating that way, and many employers, I think, are probably much more focused on getting the basics right, and I think that it's difficult for the universities to reconcile these mixed signals that they're getting from from industry at times, and come up with a formula that satisfies these different stakeholders.
Yeah, it's certainly something at AusIMM we're passionate about. We're certainly committed to pursuing or creating an overarching council that's got a bias for action, that can make sure that industry is speaking in a more coordinated way in terms of what that what the demands are in terms of quantifying those demands, but also what those future workforce needs will be, but also making sure we've got a more coordinated approach in terms of the way that we link up industry with universities, with government, because there's clearly, to respond to David's point, some real misalignment there, and there's a lack of coordination. And I think it's going to require us to think very differently around kind of how we respond to that. I think one thing that's an absolute given is that it's unrealistic to expect that the universities will produce the quantity of students or graduates that we need with the right skills. So clearly there's going to be a different role for industry and companies to play in terms of taking graduates and making them, inducting them into the industry, if you want to think of it that way. So interested, Peter, yourself just talking a little bit about kind of how you see the role of companies like Northern Star playing a more, active, having a more active involvement in terms of this cycle of continuous learning and taking those people you're employing and bringing them into the industry, particularly in response to those very different skills that we're going to require going forward.
Sure, and while I was just listening to Brendan and David, I was reminded of some consultancy work I did with the Australian Law Society a few years back, and they were trying to figure out which graduates most thrived at the 5 and then 10-year mark, and they had a 10-year study, and they had a look at, is it the marks, is it the college, is it the units, the specialisation, the diversity of the first year of practice, those sorts of things. The only valid predictor of, or the only significant correlation between success at the 5 and 10-year marks was resilience, actually. Resilience, the ability to constantly learn, readjust, bounce back, obviously setbacks, difficult feedback, failures, all of those sorts of things. And so, for us, we obviously have a very strong technical focus. We're a very lean organisation. We have more people. We're a larger company than Woodside, and about to be, bigger than a lot of companies, and yet we have an incredibly lean operation. And we focus on, certainly there's technical expertise, but increasingly I think we don't need all technical people to equally manage other people, and we don't, so we're kind of trying to have a look at how we teach things like resilience and collaboration. We have to be very analytical about it. No one's going to sit around in a circle and light incense, and kind of have a chat about stuff. But I think we want to equip people with self-awareness and awareness of others, and effective kind of communication, collaboration, self-regulation, and then infuse that with enough exceptional technical points in the business. So better to have one person who's an expert and 6 people asking why and being open to learning than it is to have 6 people all doing their own thing in silos. So we're looking at that in our team structures and also our appointments to particular projects.
I think that's a really good endorsement for the concept of diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and how we're going to need to, as an industry, do a better job to embrace different ways of thinking and respecting and valuing kind of the different perspective that's presented by different ways that people think. So
we certainly know that what got us here is not the thing that's going to get us to the next level.
Yeah, spot on. So maybe back to David, this kind of, what for many people that are, my vintage on this call, when you once upon a time went to uni, in my case studied structural engineering, and you came out of uni and worked for a consulting company and you went up the kind of the career ladder, that's all going to be very different going forward. How do you kind of see the universities responding to, what's going to be this kind of, more ambiguous workforce that's going to inevitably emerge or be the key to unlocking our kind of value as an industry going forward?
I like the comment of the ambiguous workforce. I mean, we struck the same thing in research. A lot of the old avenues that we pursued sort of seen out their useful life. We're now getting into the much more complicated areas where you're having to work in teams, and as individuals, you're having to continually learn, adapt to the new research challenges. How do we then translate that into the undergraduate programs to prepare people to move into companies and have exhibit the characteristics that Peter and Brendan have indicated they need? So resilience is a great one. As things change, are you better off having the same quantity of technical detail knowledge, the ability to, pigeonhole rocks into the different classifications of igneous, or if necessary, jump sideways, do a bit of physics because this is required for this problem that you've got to address. Get up to speed with that quickly. So these, I think, get down to the fundamental skills. With certainly for a geologist, you need some specific knowledge, or otherwise you start day one not knowing what a dual core is, but maybe not the detailed syllabus which we imagine was something which industry needed and which industry actually never asked us for. We just assumed that was the model. It also gets back to the individual. How do we develop graduates which are committed to self-improvement? We can put systems in place. We can have good universities. We can have good mentoring, and that's critical for an early career. Someone to get alongside and say, right, I'm going to assist you in your first years adapting to professional life. But beyond that, it's up to the individual to look at the areas in which they need development, and it may be technical, it may be management, it may be leadership, and then seek out systems which permit them to do that bit of development.
Yeah. So I might sort of pass that question in a way back to you, Brendan, because this is kind of what you do in your day-to-day job. You kind of wrestle with this issue about how you actually take your workforce and how you actually build that capability to be able to respond to where you see not just, the future, where you see the industry heading and in your case, Rio Tinto, where you sort of see you needing to move as an organisation. How do you actually build that capability ongoing through your workforce?
I think the best learning comes from experience, right? And so if you can give people diversity of experience, move people around, expose them to different projects, throw them in the deep end, there's nothing that will make them learn faster than that diversity of experience. And I think that when people talk about learning, often they forget that aspect of learning. They think about a classroom for learning. But, look, I think also when it does come to the classroom, and it does play a role, right? And I look at, I graduated as a geologist 28 years ago, and I look at the work of a geologist today. I look at my colleagues, the work in exploration. I look at the really heavy-duty data analytics that they do these days. And if I was still on the tools, I would be completely lost. And so I think that there is a really significant role for keeping the mid-career professionals up to date with the technological developments, and that's where I think that the universities can play more of a role than they have played in the past by having more agility in the design of their learning programs. People have talked a lot about micro-credentials, about stackable micro-credentials, these sorts of things, but reality is there's not yet a lot out there. I know that a couple of universities are definitely moving in that direction, but there's not a huge amount out there through the universities that's available today, and we'd certainly think that there's a gap there, and that that's something we definitely would like to see being developed over the coming years by the universities.
David, do you have a response to that challenge from Brendan?
Oh yeah. So I'd have to say, when I was head of school, I got rid of all our master's coursework programs. They simply were not economically viable, and they were diluting the time of staff, which could have been put into research supervision. So where do you go to get those high level skills, exposure to different areas, continued professional development? I think that's absolutely the way you go. Whether it's for micro-credentials, that's fine. Stackable credits against degrees, I don't know that people are that interested in it. I think the continued professional development is the critical area for the entire sector to help develop. So programs that are designed and delivered by a proper partnership between industry, the professional societies, government, and the university, which itself is very agile. You know, a course which you delivered 2 years ago may no longer be all that relevant. Everyone's done it. Okay, we knock it off. We go on to something else.
Yeah.
And that actually does not easily sit within the university sector to deliver that sort of program. We're happy to be involved in it, but I see that's something which must be done in partnership. There is already a lot of work that's gone into the CPD space. I mean, our professional societies deliver some really good short courses. You know, I'm being hassled to sit through the JORC code course coming up. So I think the pieces, encouraged. The pieces are in place. I just think we need to work on systems that are a bit, maybe I use the term coherent, or at least there is a bit more longer term planning for what the CPD would look like across your entire career. This is something which would be exciting for all of us to get involved with, because once as you've moved up through the profession, you go from being a student in the CPD to helping deliver.
Yeah. Well,
I think, Stephen, one of the things that sorry to cut over you there, but one of the things that I think we need to be encouraging all of the industry professionals, and I'm making a bit of a plug on your behalf here, is to be a member of a professional association. I think that, you know, it provides that structure and that framework for that continuing professional development, that connectivity to your peers across the industry, and you know, and the opportunity to give back, you know, to mentor, you know, I think it's on so many levels an obligation of every member of our industry to be part of a professional association.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, Brendan. I think, you know, to the credit of everyone involved with the AusIMM, we see ourselves as an organisation absolutely leaning into that opportunity to provide that ongoing professional development, recognising that, as confirmed today, you know, the universities are not going to necessarily be able to produce, you know, staff that can hit the ground running from a technical expertise point of view, but, you know, hopefully have the right skills and attributes. And then for us as an association to be working in partnership with industry, with universities, with government, to make sure that we can actually provide that ongoing professional development. And we see ourselves providing that to a global audience when deployed effectively, that strategy. So look, really appreciate you making that comment.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. If you look at all the professional societies, the thing that we mainly do is education. We run conferences, we do seminars, short courses, publish newsletters and journals. That is the core of it. And I think, you know, membership of the professional societies is a requirement of being a professional. And the professional societies can then start to say, well, to maintain that membership, we've got certain requirements about your continued professional development, but in return, we will help develop that for you. So that's a very useful circle.
Yeah, I think that's really, really well described. We're getting a few really great questions coming through, so that's a relief from my point of view. There's obviously interest in what we're talking about. One of the specific questions coming through actually builds on that point, David, which is about mentoring. So, Peter, just you know, this sort of notion of kind of you know, two-way connection, not just at a systems level, but at an individual level. You know, the role of mentoring and supporting this ongoing professional development. You see that as being a part of the key?
Look, critical, but even when you were both talking about professional industry, education is critical, but incumbent in that, and peak bodies and industry bodies, is collaboration. And so I think what the biggest key is to unlock the learnings within people. So obviously there's sort of formal programs where people might say, oh, we have you know, we have a mentor program, and I think they're fantastic. But I think on a broader level, like a company like Rio, I mean, so many years, if you rack up all of the experiences and all of the learnings and of people, that the task is to unlock that. So obviously mentoring is a smaller kind of scale sort of view of that, and I think that's important. But I think all of the questions and the real power in industry bodies is about unlocking the collaboration, you know, where people who are trying to solve similar problems at different points in the journey with different strengths and challenges, and maximising that, whether it's through mentoring or all the way through to industry body, is critical.
Yeah, that's how we see it. We are absolutely at AusIMM passionate about the idea of collaboration and partnerships, you know, and formalising that collaboration through the way that we work with industry and bring people together. So
it's frankly
really,
just inefficient not to, really. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I'd like to kind of just slightly change direction in terms of the conversation, because one of the clear emerging themes here is no matter which way you cut the problem, what we're clearly here in is a war for talent. And we're really, when you pull this back to kind of, a big part of the opportunity for us as an industry, it's going to be competing with other industries to draw a limited and potentially reducing workforce into our own industry. So I just wondered, Peter, maybe kicking off with yourself, to sort of what extent you, having been probably a person here that's had a lot of exposure to a lot of industries, I know that for a fact, kind of where you see the mining industry in terms of what some of those challenges look like for us and how we kind of could reframe that in terms to try to bring more talent into our industry.
Yeah, again, I mean, I think the key for me is adaptability. So our work with our people on culture and looking at their career pathing and those sorts of things, asking our sort of 3,000 people, where do you want to be in 2 years' time, teaches us that we need to be incredibly adaptable around things like life balance, career development pathways and opportunities and those sorts of things. So one of the tasks I think mining has in terms of the war for talent, if you like, there's the current kind of graduates, and says if we're expanding and if indeed, as our industry has just announced, we need 21,000 more roles in mining in this state pretty much in the next 12 to 24 months. What we need to do is be adaptable. So it's not, obviously we have people who are interested in FIFO work or residential work and long shifts, short shifts, working away from home, so I think the sector has to be really adaptable in order to continue to bring people, whether they're safety professionals, leaders, technical experts, into the kinds of environments where we can have their wisdom and experience in mining without feeling like at some point you've got to leave and go to a sort of a cushy corporate job because you can't keep doing the guts of mining. So I think adaptability really summarises everything from the curriculum to the attraction of talent across other sectors as well. Yeah.
What do you be interested? I see you nodding, David. I mean, obviously you kind of relate to that comment about adaptability, but be interested in what your perspective is in terms of what students that are within your system, what they're thinking or saying about our industry relative to other industries that they might be considering working in.
Yeah, so I mean, we need people with Peter's skill set to get inside the heads of 17 and 18-year-olds. Yeah. They're the ones who are making this decision. Where will I go to study and what will I study? Yeah. I'd have to say, the minerals industry and even more so the energy sector are not appealing to 17 or 18-year-olds. The marketing that's gone on and some of the advertisements, promotional stuff coming out, I'm not too sure who the target audience is, but it's certainly not the students that I question at the start of first year and say, why are you lot sitting in a first year geology class? And the vast majority of time it's by accident. No one goes to university to study geology. We all were trying to fill in the fourth subject and took geology and had such a great first year experience. We're still here and we'd never go back to any other discipline. I think what we've also got to understand is that while the resource sector is really important for geologists, and it's really important certainly for the Australian economy, it's important for, if we move to a low carbon economy, it'll be on the back of metals, rare earths, lithium, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the economic arguments can be put out there. The career arguments can, but doesn't have traction with the cohort that are just finishing their high school certificates. The geosciences is a very large field. Resources are important, but we've got a large number of students that wind up in paleontology or in the environmental sector, in the climate systems science. We've got a large cohort going through that. I think we have to understand that the marketing must be just how wide the geosciences is. Traditional areas, economic fields. Once we get them into geology, over the next 2 or 3 years as they go through, the mindset we see change. And by the time they hit their honours year, they're very keen to get out and find some new gold deposits. So, but it's that initial marketing that we really need to get right, because that is the gateway to the industry.
Yeah, I think there's a huge story to tell there, and we've done a very poor job at telling that story and getting people excited about innovation and technology and sustainability and social value. Brendan, just interested in your reflection on that, and also as you respond to that point, just also wanting to see if you think there are some other industries in the spirit of collaboration we should be either learning from or working with in terms of trying to solve what's ultimately a very wicked problem.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on one of David's points first, because he made the reference to the metals is going to drive the energy and climate change sort of transformations, and that reminded me that when we look at the skills that we're going to need to sort of decarbonize the resources industry and the skills that and so many other industries that are trying to do the same thing at the same time, and when we look at, you mentioned before, the war for talent, and I think we're going to find that war is even more intense when we look, try and compete for, data scientists, mechatronics engineers that have skills that are applicable not only to the resources industry, they're applicable across every industry at the moment. And you overlay with some of the sort of the perception issues that David mentioned before about, how 17, 18-year-olds think about our industry. And that presents a pretty grim picture in terms of our ability to attract those skills. And, really those skills are the ones that are going to be driving, the transformation, of our industry, that next generation of productivity improvements that, enable us to meet our investors' expectations. So it's a really, it's a hard enough challenge just addressing the traditional disciplines and the numbers and attracting people into those industries, let alone these very sort of future-focused industries. Yeah. So, I don't think I can, off the top of my head, point to another industry that we can replicate, Stephen. But
I think that in Australia, the defence industry has been very effective at making their industry look appealing and exciting in terms of being involved with technology and. For what is presented as a very noble cause, protecting our country, they've both been very effective. I think we can, as an industry, learn from that. Just in the closing 2.5 minutes, I wanted to, so that we're not rushing this at the end, thank very much Brendan, Peter and David for being a part of this conversation. Clearly through the questions coming through, there's a heap of interest. I know from my own conversation, so many people are passionate about this very topic. My closing question is, firstly to yourself, David, then Peter, then Brendan. A lot of people listening today that care deeply about this, our industry, and recognise what a huge problem this is. What would be your suggestion or advice to anyone that's a part of this conversation or listening to this conversation today? What could people personally do to kind of try to change to make an improvement in this space? Is it being a part of mentoring or talking to teachers or writing to their local MP? What do you think people could do to try to improve the situation and try to help us progress this wicked problem?
So look, a society that understands the breadth of the earth sciences, the importance of it, the interest, the fundamental interest of it is critical. It's great for kids to go through and do earth sciences in their latter years of high school and then come on to geoscience programs, but it's just as useful to have a generally educated society about where geology sits in the big picture.
Thank you. I'm getting the 1 minute wrap up. So 30 seconds, Peter. The same question to yourself. What's the one thing people can do to affect change?
I think we've all just got to think differently. We can't keep bringing the last little bit of sort of moisture out of the rag. We just need to just stop and reset, and that's exciting.
Beautiful. And finally from you, Brendan, you've already thrown some big challenges. We need to we require a well-coordinated action. Is that probably your main?
Well, we need to collaborate. We need to come together, industry, universities and government. We need to collaborate better. And then we also need to change hearts and minds one story at a time. We've all got a role to play in changing those hearts and minds about the perception of the industry.
Beautiful closing point. Perfect summary. Thanks to the panel. Thanks to all the people who have dialed into this conversation today. Really appreciate your support and look forward to catching up with you next time. Thank you.